Hi guys, and welcome to our History Inside in a Nutshell. Well, yearly tradition now, as we're all gonna actually call ourselves, the yearly tradition of our very special Titanic streaming anniversary, featuring the Titanic Honor and Glory real-time sinking as we normally do. But we got a panel of historians with us today, but there's only four of us tonight at the time of recording. So we've got Travis.
Good evening.
Travis is doing like the little piece. Oh, well, not the piece.
Good evening, all.
I absolutely love it though. And then we have Biscuit with us.
Evening.
And then finally we have DK.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh yes, we are ready to rock and roll. So it's only just going to be the four of us, but we have decided to actually react and have a little discussion with the Titanic Honor and Glory live stream. Well, not live stream, real time sinking. But this year we were hoping for our friends from Titanic Honor and Glory to do a brand new real-time sinking animation, but then I haven't really watched the whole thing, but I know DK has. So DK, do you want to explain a little bit about what you saw?
Yes, basically, I've been hopping back and forth between from Titanic Honor Glory and On a Sea of Glass from Part-Time Explorer. Big shout out to both of those channels. However, for the Titanic Honor and Glory animation, they actually basically did it live in front of an audience, which also had their own panels of historians and experts as well, including one Mike Brady from Ocean Liner Designs as well, who was actually there in attendance this time around for a change. Last year, he wasn't with them because he was sick, which is very bad for an April, because I was hoping he was going to show up last year, but unexpectedly he got sick, and he said perfectly in live stream, every year I want to be sick in April.
But it's glad that Mike was here to do the Titanic Honor and Glory live stream from the Queen Mary, because they live streamed the 2023 animation from the Queen Mary, from what I understand.
Yes, that they did.
Oh, that was really cool though, because I'm so gutted to miss it. But you know, UK and US time differences, it's a bit annoying to say the least. But it's all good though. It's really all good. But since they only showed the 2023 real-time seeking animation, we all thought it will be good just to go ahead for our reaction to it, because not only we're going to consider this as a yearly tradition on our channel, but we are going to be sharing some more stories of the Titanic, especially those that we haven't really touched on for either a while or never before. And I know, Travis, you have volunteered to do a lot of talking on a few typical subjects. Do you want to explain what they are?
Just a couple of little things. Just a couple of the classic engineering mythbuster sort of things. One being that, oh, she sank because of poor quality steel, or, oh, it was bad safety practices that led to such a loss of life. It's not quite the case. By the standards of shipbuilding at the time, she was built of some of the best steel the White Star Line could get their hands on, and understandably so, with how much visibility she would have. There is rightfully some blame placed on the chemistry of the rivets, which were from which were cast iron. But given how much we know now about metallurgy compared to 1912, we've come quite a ways, and we understand that by the time the metal was actually quite good. And even the number of lifeboats she carried exceeded at the time the British Board of Trade's requirements for lifeboats to be carried by ocean going vessels. The idea being that she would always be within range of another ocean going vessel, and they would be essentially used to shuttle people from one ship to another.
And then also, it's very important to recognize the myths as well as the facts as well. So I definitely think it's going to be a really interesting subject to focus from your end, Travis. And Biscuit and DK, what topics would you be focusing on during the live stream? Would you be focusing on stories, or would you be focusing on some facts or any recommendations for content creators?
Well, I'm more likely to focus on both the story and, of course, share facts about the RMS Titanic itself, her passengers, and also crew members as well.
Brilliant. And then what about you, Biscuit?
I'll be more focused on the facts of the ship and how everything played out, just timing and everything like that.
Fair enough, really. And then I will be focusing on some of the stories, including mostly on Collapsible Lifeboat Beat, because I'm still in the process of writing a book, because I am writing a book for a competition at the moment, but I'm not sure how that's going to go far down. But if it doesn't really go well according to plan, I will consider publishing it in the meantime, but it is in the works. So I will be focusing on that, and I'll be focusing on a few centre stories as well. But in the meantime, we'll probably get started. And if anyone has like any questions at any time, just always put your hand emoji up at any time. But we won't be muted this time, but when we're recording or when someone's speaking, because there's only going to be 4 of us, so we just thought we would just jump into a little bit. So, but if you ever have something to say, because on Discord we have like little emoji signs, so if we encourage people just to have to say what they do, they could put an emoji hand up in the chat or Discord, or just simply around the screen. And yeah, we'll probably So like DK and Travis are just showing us what it was. So anyway, so without further ado, let us begin to the night of April 14th, 1912.
Also, one more thing, on my microphone I got a little tap to mute, so if the little red light is on, that means my mic is working. If it's off, it's off.
Cool. But we'll probably have to be standby because of a case of everything. Right, so we'll probably get started. So, as we go on, April 14th, 1912, the Titanic is at her 4th day at sea, and everything's just going on, and everything's all peaceful and calm as per usual. But then an event happened which changes lives forever. And as we can see now, it is that time, probably towards nearly midnight for April 15th. So it's 11:35 p.m. ship's time. And they're just about heading, well, they're 2 days away from reaching New York City. But because the ship was planned to schedule for arriving on April 17th, completing her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. But as we all know, it never got there, really. And then you can see in the animation, even though it's from 2023, you can see it through the animation, it's all calm, it's all quiet, the stars are out, and it was just a moonless night, and everything was just very calm. And then most of the people have gone off to bed, really. It's just as quiet as a mouse when you just add into, like, many rooms, mainly generally the first class areas, but there were some people who did stay up. Yeah, with the text said, so people would read a good book. I would definitely be a person who would read a book at night.
You'd probably find me in the smoking lounge with a cigar and a scotch and a good book.
But if anyone had to be in like in a class, which would you be happily settled in? First, second, or third class?
And just based on, if you plopped me back into 1912 with what I know and what I can do today, you'd probably find me in second class, realistically. Like, I think with what I know and what I do, I would have done decently well, but not enough to go into first class.
I'll probably just stick in first class myself.
I would love to be in first class, but realistically, I'd end up at best in second class.
Fair enough.
I'll probably end up in first class.
Yes, right on, Biscuit. What about you, DK?
Well, to me, I kind of fancy either being in first class or be a bridge officer on the Titanic.
Nice. Oh,
And
well.
as we saw previously, around this time frame that Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, at 11 p.m., not 11 p.m., 10 p.m., they relieved lookouts Archie Jewell, to which we will get to, and George Simons, another one we'll also get to as well. Currently under the watch is First Officer William McMaster Murdoch. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee had been ordered to look out for ice, and as we know, Titanic was sailing through a calm, moonless night in the North Atlantic Ocean. Now, this night, it's not like any particular night. Usually, your North Atlantic routes are usually, rough, stormy, but in this case, it was very calm, like pitch still. As I recall from a Charles Lightoller, that actually did say that it was very calm and it was like a mill pond. And before Captain Smith went off to his stateroom, he ordered Lightoller, if there's a slightest degree doubtful, please let me know.
And then, of course, it did happen, but then Lightoller was off duty around this time. And then we got the Titanic on a glory plot. And here we go.
And this is when the light lookouts call the bridge, ice dead ahead.
I can really imagine what it will be like, really, watching it all from the crow's nest, because Reginald Lee, apparently, when the ship hit the iceberg, he ducked just right when he saw the iceberg. He just ducked down in the crow's nest, and he was scared.
I can't say I blame him.
Exactly. Who can blame him for that?
I still contend that if the Titanic had hit the iceberg head on, she would have survived.
Oh, that's debatable.
At the very least, she would have flooded fewer compartments, I think, or would have stayed afloat longer.
And there we go. She's just collided with the iceberg.
Right, and scans have found that, actually this is portrayed pretty accurately. They found about 6 gashes. It wasn't one long big cut. It was several shorter cuts that the iceberg made below the waterline.
Yeah.
There was another passenger who recalled the feeling as a train suddenly stopping in a railway station. Like it wasn't a shock, but it was noticeable.
And then we just got up to the flooding of boiler rooms 5 and 6. And then there's a really very big detailed account from Frederick Barrett, who was one of the people who first saw the water coming in. And if you read his testimony on Google, oh my god, it's like watching a roller coaster ride, definitely. So I will leave links to testimonies in the description box down below as well, because there's going to be many amounts of people we're going to be mentioning in the live stream. But yeah, so we'll definitely get the chance to do that as well. So Frederick Barrett is one key player, so is Frederick Fleet. I don't know if Reginald Lee actually did have a testimony that he made, but I don't really know for sure. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of people coming up, especially from testimonies, newspaper clippings, etc.
What I do like is they did have the mention of practically unsinkable in the text here. It's always a pet peeve of mine whenever anyone says she was called unsinkable. She was never called such until after the fact.
Oh yeah, that's right, actually. Completely forgot about that. And I also do apologise. I If you hear a clunking, that's me having like 2 drinks, a cup of tea, herbal tea, and water. But I'm not drinking alcohol, by the way, unlike someone who is.
Oh,
Travis
man.
is just like, don't deny it.
Another quick action on the part of the engineering crew was to douse the fires when they could, because water below freezing meeting boilers well above the boiling point of water could have led to an explosion easily.
Definitely. DK, you had your hand up.
Yes, Travis, the comment that you said about the Titanic's side scraping the iceberg was described as a train pulling to a stop. That was actually described by a second-class passenger named Ava Hart.
Right, one of the last survivors who actually remembered the sinking, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she did appear in some documentaries here and there up until her death in, I believe, in the mid-90s, 96, 95. I can't remember the year.
1996.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. You got your very historian who knows the facts. One of many. Yeah, but she was one of the few people who remembered about the Titanic. But because some of the kids' events of the disaster were really like traumatic, and I think Ruth Becker, she died just before Eva Hart, and about 1991. Roughly, I think, but I could be wrong. I just could be wrong. Now, from what you can see in the animation there was some ice that was left on the forewell deck, on the forward well deck. Yes, beg your pardon. And there were accounts of steerage passengers playing with the ice like it was a football, and they had a football match there at one point, and that was noted by first class passenger Jack Thayer, and he was watching it with his dad at the time, and then also to the stewards who were like who were watching it as well, and that is featured in my upcoming book that I've written about. And seeing it was almost like an innocent game, really, but later on it was show that it will be like quite serious. And DK mentioned that Ruth Becker died in 1990, so I think you were absolutely right there, DK. Well done.
Incidentally, Ava Hart was one of the people who testified that yes, she did see that ship break in two.
Yeah, and so did Ruth Becker, but then Ruth Becker got shut down at the Titanic convention before the wreck was discovered, and that story still gets on my nerves. It really does.
Oh, forgive me for the language, but that really pisses me off. That some so-called enthusiast goes up to a real survivor saying, "Oh, you didn't see this. It was all an illusion."
That man had no idea what he was talking about, really.
And I bet you, when the wreck was discovered and it was found out that the ship was broken in two, I bet you that so-called enthusiast really ate his own words.
I hope he did.
Now, you can see like the cargo holds that is just getting flooded. That was one of the other few places that was starting to flood quite quickly, and then the next room was the postal office. But even though the Titanic was leaning to the side at the time, it wasn't really quite noticeable as much. It didn't really even occur to the passengers, really, because it was noted that during the voyage before the iceberg collision, the Titanic was tilted anyway, and that was due to the coal bunker fire.
I believe I can answer that one for you.
Oh, please do, DK.
Coal fires are pretty common inside coal bunkers, and Titanic was very unfortunate to have one. Apparently, the reason why she actually had that list towards port was basically all the shifting of the coal from the starboard side to the port side. Now, if you actually think about it, think about trying to distribute weight on an airplane. You gotta have the right balance. Unfortunately, that tilting for the Titanic actually really did affect the trim of the ship, and it was very noticeable. One included a Irene Harris, who was actually in the grand staircase, she actually slipped, fell, and broke her arm. Now, I talked to another friend of mine, Russeloff, who actually thinks that this actually happened on the 14th, but previous documentaries show that it happened on the 13th, and Titanic Honor and Glory, with a recent new video, actually depicted this incident happening on the 14th.
Oh, sorry, Travis is actually showing like footage of
this is Sunny.
Oh my gosh, I love Sunny.
He's a good boy.
Oh.
And he's chilling out in his daddy's lap.
Oh, well, we do love our animals.
So the sound of as if 20 locomotives were sitting blowing off steam. As someone who has worked around steam locomotives, just sitting around one blowing off steam is deafening. Imagine 20 of them. The deck officers had to shout to make themselves heard, even without the noise of the crowd that would come later in the night.
Definitely, and then they also had to use like hand gestures as well in a few accounts, but they didn't really use like hand gestures like sign language or anything, because I don't know when sign language was actually properly used. But all I had to do was just like do gesture actions, so like stop or can't hear you, that sort of thing. And I think that everyone didn't really know what they're doing, and that's there were misinterpretations there just because of the excess steam. And I bet that's probably what have happened in the situation with Charles Lightoller when it comes to filling up the lifeboats. But we will get to that later on in the video.
I'm going to the cargo hold just earlier. This just occurred to me. The Reno, I believe it was in pieces at the time of the sinking, or was that ever officially confirmed one way or another?
Question. I don't know.
I've heard some accounts suggest it was loaded on in pieces. I've heard others suggest it was loaded fully. I'm not sure which. I'm not sure which was the case.
That's interesting. That never occurred to me before. Right, so water is starting to fill up quite quickly, and then the excess steam is going out. Now, bear in mind, if anyone has seen any Titanic Honor and Glory footage, just remember for this, everyone thinks that all 4 funnels were active, but if anyone wondered, if they came with Titanic for the first time, why the excess steam came off from 3 funnels instead of all 4, was because that the 4th funnel was actually a dummy funnel, and it was just used for ventilation systems, especially with the air conditioning from the kitchens and the bakery.
Don't forget, you also got that first-class fireplace as well. It still serves as a function, though.
Oh, yeah, of course, I forgot about that. Please excuse me for my squeaky chair. It's getting old now.
I couldn't have heard it until you mentioned it.
No, that's fair enough. But it might be heard like a few times because I do have squeaky old chairs.
In fairness, I'm sitting on an Amazon gaming chair right now, so your mileage may vary.
I'm so jealous.
Again, Amazon.
Yeah.
And water in the first
I got one as well.
Water in the first 3 holds this quickly on. This is serious business.
It says in the description, I probably won't repeat that because I'll let everyone else read that, but basically Simon Barrett and then the lamp trimmer Samuel Hemming were the first people to report that the Titanic was going to sink, even before other people knew, even before the ship's designer Thomas Andrews Jr. He didn't really know, but apart from Frederick Fleet and Samuel Hemming, they were the only 2 that said, yeah, Titanic's actually going down.
So if you read or listen to On a Sea of Glass, Andrews was such an interesting man throughout like the first couple of days of the voyage, the man was almost electrifyingly alive, going around the entire ship, just finding every little problem that he could figure out.
And then the lights do go out in the boiler rooms not long after, and even though they do go out in the boiler rooms, the engineers and the firemen did their very best to keep the lights going on, and I think that's one of the bravest actions anybody could have done, really. One of the bravest people during the whole sinking. And even if you ask anyone who was the greatest hero or who were the greatest heroes during the disaster, most people would definitely say the firemen and the engineers.
Yes.
They kept the lights going until the very end.
Oh yeah, definitely, but not because the boiler rooms were the only ones that everyone had to do in complete darkness, but with the engine room and then up above, the lights were just still switched on. And then you just got at the top on the promenade deck near the first class entrance. Everything's just all completely fine down there.
Until you look down a set of stairs.
Like Joseph Boxall did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Joseph Boxall's testimony, especially with his radio interview, was really interesting because he did point some bits out, but he didn't really mention all the bits that he pointed out, because if you read the comparison between his testimony in 1912 and listen to his BBC interview from 1962, real difference, and his story changes every single time, but I will definitely include those as well because it's a fascinating read, and it's also a really interesting thing to hear. But I know in 1962 Boxall was going through some health issues around the point, and I think he nearly had dementia by that point, but I really don't know for sure. I could be wrong.
I do also wonder if part of it was he just had more time to process it all.
Maybe. That sounds like another fair point.
And when you go through such a traumatic event like this, the snapshot memories are going to be what really lives with you.
Oh yeah, a lot of them, the survivors, they had PTSD, and I know I did cover that with a friend of mine many years ago, Claire, because we did a video together on PTSD and the Titanic as well, because he is a nurse and she has worked with a few patients who had PTSD, so it was kind of like interesting to have like a sit down and a chat. She even looked at some of the counts as well, and she was really shocked about what people went through as well. And some of the people who had PTSD, some of them had a really negative impact in their later lives. And there was one story where a survivor, I still can't remember, I think it was Frankie Goldsmith, I think, because every time he heard a crowd, people in a crowd cheering, because he lived near a baseball field, every time he heard a crowd roaring, it would just remind him of the people drowning in the water.
Hey, I was just thinking of that very same story.
Oh really? Great minds think alike.
I think this was also at a time when they knew that PTSD was a thing, but they didn't know exactly what it was.
They just didn't really know how to deal with it, and it was the same case after the Titanic disaster. And I don't really think it was like dealt with really until like later on. I think it was roughly the 60s or the 70s, because Eva Hart, she had to go through counselling in her later life, probably around in the 70s, because she did mention it in an interview when SOS Titanic came out back in 1979, and she said when she was older, the memories and the trauma was really bad from her childhood and up to that point, that she needed to go to therapy. And it really surprised me that how she managed to get therapy later on in life, but I think that there was just limited access at the time. But it was a good thing that she did, though, because she got some of it off her chest, which was really good.
And then, of course, you have the Great War shortly after this, and then World War II not too long afterward, where you would see shell shock.
Definitely, and some of the survivors served in the war as well. That That shot, when I look at it, wow.
Imagine coming out of that cabin right there near the stairwell and just happen to see that water coming in.
I would just nope out of there and immediately head for the staircase.
I think I do the same as well.
But it wouldn't be that simple because with different accounts, especially for third class passengers, they were told that even though something was wrong, they were told by some stewards that nothing was wrong and they were just ordered to go back to bed. And then by the time they realised something was wrong, it was almost too late. And I read some of the accounts from my book, just as research, and some of the third class survival accounts, they were really shocking and really surprising.
And be right back.
But it's just really, 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 really scary when you think about it. Really, it was just like going through a horror movie that's just waiting to happen. But yeah. It's just really, really scary. But I will touch on that later on, actually. So, yeah, so that will be a thing that will be focused on later. Because there will be a little bit of a debate about this. So, yeah. So we'll definitely get onto that. And then, yeah. So Travis said he'll be right back. And, yeah. So, at the moment, it's just DK, Biscuit, and me. But, DK and Biscuit, if you have anything to add, don't be shy.
I'm sure I'm not shy about anything.
I'm gonna probably stay muted for a while because there's some background noise around me that's getting pretty loud, so.
Okay, so we're getting to the part now where we see the mail room being flooded. And there were a few accounts to the mail room, but then there was only one officer who actually witnessed in this moment. DK, I believe you knew the story or know the story?
Yeah, basically what the mailmen were trying to do, the mail clerks, you have to keep this in mind though, that the Titanic is a Royal Mail ship. It carries mail from the United Kingdom to the United States or vice versa, like the Olympic. And of course, as we saw, the date is now April 15th, 1912 on Monday. And of course, Joseph Boxhall, who actually went around and did his own inspection of the damage, now actually realized the damage is much worse than they thought. So now he's headed back to Captain Smith, so that way he can report on his observings and his findings.
So they're just putting the lifeboats, they're preparing the lifeboats now, and they're recovering all the canvases. And I can imagine though, because unlike the animation, it must have been really difficult to get the canvases open in real life, really. But yeah, I just can't imagine how that would happen, and what actually happened to the canvases after the sinking. Yeah, so the third class passenger, there's a testimony from the third class passenger, Julius Nard, I think that's how his name's pronounced. But what he said in a few accounts is true, because most of the third class passengers actually woke up or actually saw the water coming in straight away, and the third class passengers knew that something was wrong before the stewards did. Either that, or the stewards were just trained to say, oh, nothing is wrong, just go back to bed. And that was that, really.
I have returned.
Yay! You're back! So we're just getting up to a point now where all the lifeboats are being getting ready, Travis. So
Gotcha.
yeah. So And the light in the boiler rooms come back on. Now, I don't know how they came back on, but I am assuming that they had emergency power on down there, or if there was something going on in the engine room.
I do recall there was an emergency generator, but so long as the boilers had kept going, it may have. I have to do a little bit more research on that, but I would imagine there must have been some sort of a breaker they needed to reset somewhere or some such.
Yes, I hear said.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Alright. What the Titanic actually has is basically the emergency dynamos,
Right.
which actually is powered on by steam. There's actually a pipe that connects from boiler room number 2 to these engine dynamos. Now, we just recently seen the National Geographic documentary of the new scans of the wreck of the Titanic, and let me tell you one thing, 1 out of 10 stars, would not recommend, but at least there's some insight about some of the scans itself. And basically there was a valve that's actually on the stern wreck. It was still stuck in the open position. That's how those lights actually still stayed on until the very end.
And then there's the troubleshooter in me trying to figure out how they went out and then went just right back on.
But I can't imagine what it would have been like really in real life when some things just go on and off. I mean, I'm not an expert really on like mechanics or anything. In fact, I'm pretty useless when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, look, I'm just a railroad nerd that happens to like ships.
But then that's really good, though. Right, so this is what's starting to happen because Captain Smith is going around the decks, and then there have been a few people who have stopped him to ask what was wrong, and it was the same with Thomas Andrews. But before the collision happened, Captain Smith at the time was somewhere. Everyone assumed he was in his quarters. That is not true. What happened was that he was either in the chart room or elsewhere, but he was known in some reports to be in the chart room, and he did feel the collision, and then knowing what happened, he went straight onto the bridge, and that's when he asked Murdoch, "What did you struck?" And Murdoch said, "An iceberg, sir. I pulled her hard to starboard, but she was too close. I couldn't do any more." And that was when Captain Smith started beginning to see Thomas Andrews and say, "Hey, look, this is what happened. Have an inspection going on around the deck immediately." So this happened, and then later he will inform the 2 Marconi wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, to be on standby to send on the emergency messages. So basically he was just all over the ship, and there was one story that I heard that he went down into the boiler rooms himself to see what happened, and so did Thomas Andrews.
And my understanding is that... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I cut you off there.
No, you go first, Travis.
No, after you.
No, are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, right, okay. So, anyway, it was just chaos all over the place. That's probably what I was going to say, really.
And I was just going to kind of say, to your point, there are some that say that Captain Smith froze up or had a nervous breakdown. No, my understanding is he was quietly competent throughout the whole thing. He was getting around, assessing the situation, giving orders where he needed to be, but also delegating to people that, that knew how to do their job as well.
But I think he was, like, calm about everything. He was just not shocked or anything, because a lot of people have misinterpreted him as just, like, this other kind of person. No, that is not true. And there was a few examples of myth-busting his actions around the ship, because he was calm and he knew what he was doing. He knew how to do his training, and he had this very British attitude of keep calm, carrying on. And even though there was
competence.
Yeah, exactly, competence, exactly. And then also he was just like trying to make sure that everything was okay. But then turned out, even though if everything was not okay, things would go wrong, especially in the case of Second Officer Charles Lightoller. But again, we will get to him in a minute because he's a very important part of the sinking. Definitely important. Now, Charlotte Collier, now I came across a video on her the other day, and she actually written a very long detailed account about what happened to her and her daughter Marjorie during the sinking. She and her daughter, well, Marjorie, they all travelled together on the Titanic, but sadly Charlotte's husband, and I think his name was Henry, he didn't survive, but Charlotte and Marjorie did. And I will include a link to the YouTube video in the description box down below as well. It is a really fascinating listen, and I definitely would recommend it, but be warned, you have to get the tissues out because it's just the most heartbreaking thing you will ever hear, especially when she mentions her daughter Marjorie. But I just love stories where they would talk about like all the women, and then I always think that every passenger's story is truly heartbreaking, but the one with children, it always gets me, really does. It's interesting. Crewmen are forced to gather their belongings and evacuate the quarters. Now, I didn't really notice this before, but does anyone know any account that there's a relation to that? Or was it just only focused on third-class passengers? Because third-class passengers did actually collect all their belongings to take them up to the lifeboats. I never heard of crewmen.
I recall.
Yeah?
Nothing that I recall immediately.
I thought we probably might have to do more research on that or something.
Exactly, yeah. I'll have to reread a Sea of Glass and see what I can dig up from there.
Definitely. And then there's probably a bit more stuff like going on. Because DK, you read a different volume of Titanic books that was updated, you and Jake.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think I do have it above my head. I do have the Titanic collections, which is volumes both 1 and 2, Fragments of History, and there's basically a whole lot. Like, it's really hard for me to tell, because once I open up my bookcase, it's filled with Titanic, or Lusitania, or Mauritania. Also got a couple of Great Lakes freighters in there, and a couple of other ships as well.
I meant to pick your brain on some Great Lake Freighters stuff at some point soon.
Yeah, I think I got one about the Edmund Fitzgerald, the Carl D. Bradley, and the Daniel J. Morrill.
Yeah, definitely picking your brain later on.
I'm sorry, but I will have to go for the next about hour and a half. So I will be back if you guys are still here.
Don't worry, Biscuit. I'm sure it will be. Yeah, but thank you for coming if we didn't see you anyway, Biscuit. But yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Right, there we go. Then there were 3.
It always spooks me about a lot of these animations that it's even darker than they're depicted.
Well, it was probably more darker than what it was portrayed in films like James Cameron's movie Titanic and A Night to Remember. Especially if you look at the colorized version, if you can make a comparison between the two, I always find that the lighting on board the ship in A Night to Remember was a bit more brighter than the one in James Cameron's movie Titanic, and it never occurred to me why until recently.
Is it something to do with I only know enough about filmography to be dangerous, but is it something to do with just shooting in black and white versus color, or is it a James Cameron trick? Because I know the man is notorious for attention to detail.
I mean, James Cameron did have a little bit of inaccuracies, but it was 1997 at the time, and information was still being picked up. But I think with A Night to Remember, it could be black and white, and then there's a colorized version you can watch on YouTube. So it's really really good just to have a little bit of watch. But maybe it was brighter just because of the black and white thing, but not really too sure for that. I wish I was an expert on like movie technology, but even though I've been an actress for about 15 years, I cannot tell you like the ins and outs, because the only experience I already got for behind the scenes of any theatre and movie sets was just opening and closing the curtains and making sure actresses would get on the stage.
Hey, we're on the same page.
Yeah, that was just for studies. I mean, I didn't get paid for it or anything. That was just part of my degree course that I had to do. Right, okay, so we're getting to that final moment where water is continuing to rise. And if you hear some noise, please excuse me. My laptop is dying and I've got to recharge it immediately.
Uh-oh. Avoid the crisis.
Yeah, avoid the crisis. You don't want to lose me, guys.
We don't need a Great Tea Flood incident like what happened 4 years ago.
4 years ago on April 18th, this very night, this is recorded. Yeah, now you can see in the boiler rooms, water is flooding up high, and this is coming from boiler room number 5? If I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong.
It's 6.
This for me is one of the most terrifying recreated images of the entire sinking.
Agreed.
You have to remember that boiler room number 6 was in the impact zone. The water filled up really quick in there.
Oh, so it was 6. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And then all the passengers are starting to coming up on the decks now. But there was this really interesting thing that I did work on, because there was, when I was writing the book, there was a few accounts from what I can remember, because everyone was given different instructions, and all the passengers that were required to stay on deck were told that, oh, the lifeboats were going to be lowered down to A deck, and passengers would climb into the lifeboats through the windows, and then all the passengers, especially ones in first class, would just keep waiting. And then one of the crew members said, oh, we can't lower down these lifeboats at like a different angle, it's going to be a bit tricky. So everyone was recalled to get back up again, and it was just really confusing. And that's one of the many errors that happened during the sinking. And now we're getting
the ambience to play.
Yeah, that's it. We got the orchestra now. Now, I always find that the orchestra is one of the most saddest stories I've ever heard, because you got 8 musicians who were on board that were not employed by the White Star Line. And these 8 musicians were part of a company called CNN Black of Liverpool. And they were hired to perform on the Titanic, just representing the company. And out of like the 8 group people, you had one group which was the quintet, which was led by Wallace Hartley, and then you had the trio that didn't really have like a confirmed, clarified leader, but they consisted of very talented musicians who wanted to do like their own set, and they were known to play around all different areas of first class, but the trio did play music in the second class dining saloon, and this was recorded by second class passenger Kate Buss, who mentioned John Wesley Woodward. Now I still did have difficulty pronouncing his surname, but basically he was basically the most friendliest person on board, but I do think they had a little bit of a fling going on, and it still makes me think they did have a fling, really, even though I don't know what his marital status was at the time, but for Kate, she was engaged, so it was kind of like a little bit of a fling. But it was really interesting to see how their lives, well, how they basically like went around the ship really, but sadly all 8 of them would perish in the sinking. And they did all they could just to play on as much as they possibly could to keep the passengers calm and happy. But by the time it came to the end, they knew that they wouldn't have left long and everybody was just gone. But I had this feeling that they kind of knew, yeah, they weren't going to go on to the lifeboats, especially with Wallace Hartley, because there was an account that when he was on the Mauritania before he went on the Titanic, he said to a colleague, if I ever travel on a ship that was sinking, I would play the song Nearer My God to Thee. And he stuck with his word to this very night. I did like a little bit of research on him on like what happened, because I did like a 4-part documentary which I need to revise at some point for the channel. But what happened with the musicians is that when the collision happened, now I can't remember that during my research one group actually felt the collision while the other didn't, but when I was trying to look through my research, it's possible that one members of the trio group actually felt the iceberg collision because they were all settling in different cabins on E deck at the time. And what happened was that after the 8 musicians were reunited, the captain came in and told them what happened, and that was straight before he went to the wireless cabin. So Wallace got everyone up together and they said, "Righto boys, let's go up to keep the passengers calm." And that's just what they did, and they remained up on the boat deck during the sinking.
And Eva Hart's testimony also corroborates their last tune as being Nearer My God to Thee.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of people said it was really, but then we had like opposite accounts, like from Harold Bride. He thought Autumn was one, but most of like enthusiasts and historians now agree that they did play both songs, but they definitely sounded the same. But I think that Autumn played first and then Nearer My God to Thee. I just love the Nutcracker, and I think it's not the Sugar Plum Fairy, but like another tune. But these would have been played during 1912 because ballet music and ragtime was very popular. But I still love that type of music from the Nutcracker.
I was going to say ragtime was also one that was a style that was very much played this evening.
But then it was just like all the popular stuff at the time, because if anyone wanted to request doing the song, the White Star Line would have a little booklet, and when the passengers would read the booklets, they wanted to from the booklets they would encourage the passengers to shout out the number of the song to the musicians, and they would just play it, bam, just like that. And then DK, I just noticed in the chat, says that Alexander's ragtime band was released 1 week before the Titanic's launch in 1911. I did not know that fact, but that was a very good fact. Okay, so we've got an account by William Sloper said that Thomas Andrews was rushing up and at below and said nothing that was trouble with a serious face that looked concerned. Yeah, that was very true, because at this time, which was nearly 12:25, Thomas Andrews just came up from the boiler rooms and the engine rooms to find what was going on, and he did have a terrified look on his face to know what happened. And there was accounts that he told some first-class passengers about the situation, because he knew right then the ship was going to sink. And this account was actually later recorded by Jack Thayer, who Thomas Andrews told him and his dad about what happened, because they noticed that the ship was tilting a little bit more than usual, and that's when Thomas Andrews told them the truth. And basically they had to get everyone, his family together, which was his mother, Jack Thayer's mother, and then her mother's maid. They just got them up together to try and get the women into the lifeboat. And then the water from the 3rd class open deck is just coming in. Now, there's been a few accounts that I read as well that when people saw the water coming in, Some of them had made no attempt to escape. They just spent time with some loved ones, and there was some accounts that they say around the open deck and in the hallways near the open deck, most of the third class passengers, they were huddled in a group, and there was a priest that led them in prayer, especially reciting the Lord's Prayer and the Lady's Prayer, Hail Mary, full of grace. And that must have been terrifying, knowing that even though they may have not some access to go up onto the boat deck, most of them just didn't want to be separated from the families, and they chose to stay together. But looking at that now with the access team, it just makes you realise that even though the music was loud, the musicians probably wouldn't be able to hear a thing, really, because they probably wouldn't have known if someone made a wrong note or something.
No, probably not. And just with the visual of it all, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have seen it at the time, but there's almost an absurdist spectacle to it, with music and hissing steam and the ship noticeably dipping down at the starboard bow while music is playing.
All the mail. Gosh. Still makes me sad, really, seeing all that mail, because the post office workers, they tried so hard to get all the mail from the flooding the post office all the way up to the decks to try and save the mail, but they never managed to do it, and all the postal workers would go down with the ship. But there is a beautiful memorial that's dedicated to them in Southampton, and it's really worth the visit if you ever get a chance to visit Southampton.
Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds.
True. There wasn't much detail into the post office, but the post office workers, but word got around about it, and that was from an account by Archibald Gracie. Now, please excuse me for the woof in the background. That was my dog.
I didn't hear a thing.
Oh no, he's barking quite loudly because we got large activity of foxes at the moment.
Aww. Hi, Paisley.
Oh, he's just downstairs. He's just downstairs at the moment, but it's nearly bedtime anyway where we are.
Also, yep, this is when the dip of the bow below, the water line is starting to get noticeable. I think you're starting to get to where the propellers are almost above the water line.
Very close.
And 4 years later, with the sinking of the HMHS Britannic, it took Britannic to be in that same position, but in 10 minutes after striking a mine.
And then with the Titanic, it just took a little bit longer.
Yet the major casualties of the Britannic were those who were, ironically enough, caught up in the propellers.
It still haunts me, really, how 30 people would die because of those propellers, and then over 1,500 people died just because of the water and there are not enough lifeboats. Still haunts me.
Like, comparing the conditions of the two wrecks side by side is staggering.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the Britannic is in much better condition compared to Titanic. And then also the real difference you can see, especially was from the recent wreck photos of the Titanic earlier last year, for the 39th anniversary of the ship's discovery.
THG.
Yeah, so now, this is where, the messages are starting to be sent out, and the captain has given the wireless operators permission to send TQD messages to Cape Race and all other ships nearby. And there were many ships that came to the rescue, and a few of them were the Baltic and the Titanic sister ship, the Olympic. And I have done a video on the Olympic during the Titanic's rescue, so I will leave a link in the card above and in the description box down below as well. And then the Mount Temple and the Frankfurt also picked up the messages as well. Travis, DK, do you want to add more information about other ships that picked up the messages?
I think, wasn't the Virginian one that picked her up as well?
I believe so.
Yes. She would also be another one. The Caronia is also another one as well. And there's also one more Cunarder that also picked it up as well by sheer luck. But I won't spoil it. If you've been watching the this ship series during Titanic Week, you would know.
That was a bit of a clue there.
Yeah.
I think all three of us here know the answer pretty well.
We do indeed.
And as a narrator for that, I'm not spoiling it.
Hey, you know what? Because I'm a nice guy, I'm not spoiling it either.
You're gonna have to watch the playlist to find out. Because I created a little playlist of it, that's the clue, and then I'll leave it in the card above and the description box down below as well, if you want to check out what it is. Okay, so now we're getting water that's starting to flood above Scotland Road.
That's right, because the door to Scotland Road had been opened by now.
Yeah, I mean, how was the door left open on Scotland Road? I really don't know, because Scotland Road was just on the deck.
Wasn't the idea that it would be another place where people could get onto lifeboats?
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know for sure. I mean, there was some accounts I came across, but I don't really remember what kind they were. I need to have a look at them again at some point.
There would be a access doorway from E-Deck connecting to Scotland Road, but the problem is the crew and the passengers actually never knew that door exists. And of course, as we can see here is the pair of lights that is basically visible off the port bow of the Titanic. That is suspected to be the SS Californian, which is a Leyland liner, which is a part of the International Mercantile Marine Company. New fact y'all didn't know.
Definitely, and oh yeah, go on. Sorry, DK.
So, for Californian story is basically, on the night of April 14, 1912, the ship encountered a massive ice field, and they also knew that the Titanic would be sailing through the area they would be in. So Cyril Evans transmitted to Titanic saying, "Say, old man, we are stopped and surrounded by ice." But here's the biggest problem is for the Titanic. Jack Phillips, who was actually on the wireless machine, was trying to listen to the faint dots and dashes of Morse code. And basically, the further the dots and dashes are, the higher you have to turn up the volume. And the Californian transmitting came at a loud, basically a loud spark or a loud shriek or something. And this basically caused Jack Phillips to yank the headset off his head and basically transmitted to the Californian, shut up, keep out, I am working Cape Race, jamming. And all this happened when Jack Phillips was transmitting a message to a Dorothy Gibson, to which she's actually going to be boarding Lifeboat 7. And after that happened, Jack Phillips transmitted to Kate Brace saying sorry about that. And as we see here, they're trying to get the Californians' attention via Morse lamp. That's those little lights up on top of the bridge wing that you're actually seeing right now. But the problem is for the Californians, they were too far out. They actually observed a ship being stopped, and from the testimonies from the officers of the Californians saying that the ship looked very queer, quote unquote, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't put the two and two together.
They did see the rockets, but they were fired at such odd intervals they didn't know what the ship was doing.
Yep. And also, you had to remember this. The Californian had one operator on board.
And he was asleep at the time. He was off duty.
Yep. And he was off duty. He basically shut down for the night. And you could pretty much say the rest became history from there. Now, why does Titanic have two and the Californian only have one? Well, it's basically both sizes of the ship comparable. Titanic would have two just because of the volume of messages. Californian only one. So that's another interesting fact. And sooner or later, that steam should stop being vented out.
Jeez, I can only imagine just how bad the ringing in one's ears must have been after being on deck for all that time with the steam venting right overhead.
And they're back.
Welcome back!
Woo! I had to dash
Welcome
out for
back.
a minute. I'm back. Oh, and just in time as well, because they're about to fill the first lifeboat in. And the first lifeboat that was launched is lifeboat number 7, and it's got a very few infamous people on it, and one of them was Dorothy Gibson, who would later to go on to be the most controversial survivor, one of the most controversial survivors you would ever meet in your life. But I won't go into full detail of her later life because it does involve a word that I don't really want to mention, otherwise I'll probably get a strike on the video.
I was going to say controversial survivors. J. Bruce Ismay would like to meet you.
Well, probably not really, but
Not really.
I have interviewed his great nephew. Yeah, and again, the interview will be linked. But yeah, so his great nephew for J. Bruce Ismay, he actually wrote a detailed account about Ismay's real movements in life on board the Titanic as well, because it's an autobiography of Ismay's life. But the full context of the Titanic goes into a great length of detail, and it's one that we will explain later on in the video, especially how he got into one of the lifeboats. But because there's a theory that I absolutely 100% agree on, but again, we'll probably get onto that, and I know a lot of people will debate about this one, so we'll get to that when we get to that.
There's also one crew member that I actually do like to cover. I wish Jake was here to cover him, and that would be Archie Jewell.
Oh yes, Archie Jewell, we mustn't forget Archie.
Yep. So at the time of Titanic sinking, the ship was actually carrying 3 of the biggest unsinkables on board. One of them would be Archie Jewell, Arthur John Priest, and Violet Jessup. Now, for Archie Jewell's case, he joined the White Star Line in 1904 and would serve as a full seaman on the Oceanic for 8 years, during which that he actually lived in Southampton at the time, and he was married sometime around 1916 to Bessie Heard and moved to Finnerney with her. On April 6th of 1912, Jewell was actually transferred to the Titanic as one of the 6 lookouts, along with 24-year-old George Simons. Another lookout would also be in lifeboat number 7 with him. This would be Alfred Hogg, I think. I mix up a lot of names. So Jewel was actually scheduled in the Crow's Nest between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, and then from 2 in the morning to 4 in the morning during the night of April 15th. However, Simons and Jewel were actually replaced by their colleagues Reginald Lee and Frederick Fleet, to which those two men would be the same men that would spot the iceberg. Jewel was in his cabin around the time of the iceberg collision, and he would be one of the first to escape sinking in lifeboat number 7. He did suffer a PTSD after seeing the ship break up in the final moments, and he would later work again on Titanic's sister ship, the HMHS Britannic, in World War I, and he did survive that one, along with Violet Jessup and Arthur John Priest. How he survived was unbelievable. He was in one of the 2 lifeboats that got pulled in by the propellers, and it was believed that when he was in the lifeboat, he looked at the giant propellers just spinning like a food processor, and basically he started saying goodbye to the earth, his wife, life, everything, and he would later survive. And he would also serve on another ship called the SS Donegal, to which it was converted into a hospital ship during World War I. However, the Donegal would sink, thus claiming Archie Jewell's life, but Arthur John Priest would also survive this as well. And Jewell's body was actually never recovered, and there's actually a plaque that actually commemorates Jewell at the Tower Hill Memorial in London, and he was survived by his wife and son, his father, and all 6 siblings, but unfortunately his son died in Exeter on December 10th of 1930 at the age of 14 after a serious illness.
Sad, really, about like Archie Jewell's son. But then Archie Jewell gave a really interesting testimony, because he was the one who actually recalls that all the...
And I have returned.
Oh, yay, Travis has returned. What was I going to say about Archie? Oh, it's at the back of my head. Oh, yeah, on the morning of the 14th, he said that the real reason why the lifeboat drill, the regular lifeboat drill for Sunday the 14th of April was cancelled due to high winds. But yeah, but I think, but we went into a video detail on that, which I'll put in the link above in the description box down below as well. But I think I'm probably going to have to say that a lot, because there's a minimum of 5 cards you have to put on YouTube, and I think there's going to be too many ones to count, really. And YouTube won't like me.
I actually used Archie Jewell's testimony in my Titanic documentary as well.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. So now we've got the Baltic and the Carpathia coming to Titanic's rescue.
The Carpathia story always makes me cry.
Oh, really?
It's... I mean, spoiler alert for those who don't know the story of the Titanic, sorry. It's a great story of, yes, we failed, but in failing, we still made more of a difference than if we hadn't tried at all.
And it really shows that in like many things. And there's a children's book about it as well called Rescuing Titanic, which is the whole story of the Carpathia. And I would highly recommend reading that book. I've got a copy of it myself, but I would really highly recommend it. Even if you're not a kid, it's still entertaining as an adult, and it always hits you.
Well, and also the fact that once Captain Rostron had been roused from his bed and was briefed of the situation and asked his operator, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Certain." Looks at the message and immediately starts relaying orders. "All right, this is serious business. Let's go."
Oh yeah, because when Harold Cottam actually receives the message.
Yeah. And then he bursts into Rostron's bedroom and relays the message himself.
And it's really interesting to know that Harold Cossum, Harold Bride, and Jack Phillips all knew each other, and they were very good friends. So it was really like touching, and it's made it more heartbreaking, really, because knowing that one operator from one wireless ship that's coming to a rescue, only to find that one of your friends who was on another ship that was sinking tragically died. You can imagine what Cotton must have felt like. And I looked into Cotton's story, and he had very little sleep since April 13th. Only because that he was trying to get series of backlog of messages in again, and he didn't really get sleep for about over 72 hours.
And he just happened to switch his wireless back on just for curiosity's sake.
No, actually, the wireless was never switched off. What happened was that he was just waiting a confirmation for another ship before he heard the Titanic.
Yeah.
But I think he probably got confused with the Californian.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because Cyril Evans did turn off the wireless set on the Californian, and they didn't really find out the Titanic sank until about 5 a.m.
Now, for the Carpathia, you have to keep this in mind, though. That ship was actually on a Mediterranean voyage at the time she picked up Titanic's distress signal.
Right, and then, so she effectively had to turn completely back around. And from what I understand, nobody on board objected.
Definitely none at all, but I know that a lot of passengers were worried and curious about what was going on, and some of them panicked. And there's a really good book on Carpathia's testimonies that was published by George Behe. I would really recommend it, and I used it for research for a series of videos that I've done this week. But it's a great book, and I would definitely recommend reading it. Herbert Pittman, the third officer, was in charge of the first boat. And it kind of makes me think that Murdoch knew that he wasn't going to survive at all.
Yeah, those two would actually see each other for a final time, shook hands, and Herbert Pittman would later board lifeboat number 5. Now, kind of gonna get a little bit ahead on purpose for this one. There was actually an engagement that actually did happen on lifeboat number 5 after the Titanic sank.
Yeah, well, we did cover that story as well, didn't we?
Oh yes. I actually covered that in the Historic Travels Discord server about it. Not many actually knew about it, to my surprise.
Yeah, a lot of people were shocked by it, really, and I was shocked but when I first read it as well, and I thought, an engagement? How can you actually ask someone, will you marry me, at a time like this?
I guess it's a now or never kind of thing. And there's the distress rocket.
First distress rocket is launched. And that was just trying to get the attention of the mystery ship. Now, do we all agree that is it either the Californian or was it another ship?
I say it's the Californian.
Right, what about you, DK?
It would be the SS Californian. Because considering where the distance of where they were at versus to the Titanic, everything kind of matched up for them. They did report a ship being stopped, and basically they did saw the rockets firing up at irregular intervals. And of course, we got a little situation going on in lifeboat number 5. Betcha I know the main reason of this. Ismay would be around where lifeboat number 5 is, and he realizes the gravity of the situation, and he tried saying, "For God's sake, hurry, there's no time, lower away, lower away." Harold Lowe, who actually saw this happening, pulled him away from the ropes and basically berated him, saying, "Do you want me to drown a lot of them?" And Ismay pulled the, "Do you know who I am?" And Lowe would fire back, "If you get the hell out of the way, maybe I should do something."
And at that point, Ismay kind of snaps out of it and is like, wait, I'm a passenger.
Yeah, you have to remember this. Lowe is an outsider. He was actually very known to other officers on the ship. And nobody actually told him what was going on. He basically woke up just to the rousing sound and noise that got irate. He was like, what is going on here?
And then the water's just coming in a little bit to second class now. And then Scotland Road is still continuing to flood. And then we can see an open door in the animation. Now, there was another way, either through this door or another way to get onto the boat deck, which is through Scotland Road, because I did read one testimony from a third class passenger that did prove this. But then, once they got up on the boat deck, a steward stopped them, and they said, "Sorry, you can't come up here. You've got to go back down." And I think it was Eugene Daly who actually recorded this. I could be wrong, but during that time that the steward blocked them, they could see the decks of ice on the forward well deck, and even though they knew they were in danger, they basically obeyed the steward because the steward was going to threaten them. And then basically after that, they knew that water was coming up.
I'd say like the greenish tinge of the porthole below the waterline is such a nice touch.
I definitely agree.
And DK, I know you'd mentioned the venting steam cutting off here. It looks like this is then.
Good. Now we can hear ourselves finally.
What?
Okay, so probably with the lifeboats, I'll probably go into Second Officer Charles Lightoller, because he is probably another controversial figure in the Titanic story. And even though that I focused on him a lot in Collapsible Being documentary, and I've focused him on my book as well, he was the one that misinterpreted the information when it comes to loading the lifeboats. When it comes to women and children, because on his side he took the order as being women and children only, and the men weren't allowed in the lifeboats, while on the other side with Wilde and Murdoch, it was interpreted to be women and children first, then men when there was room in the lifeboats. And unfortunately, it's because of this misunderstanding from Lightoller that many of the boats were left not filled, with the worst one being lifeboat number 1, which only had 12 occupants. And later in life, Lightoller would be blamed mostly for the sinking, which is kind of tragic if you ask me. And there's the Turkish rooms. But the real question is here, what happened to the swimming pool? Because a lot of people said that if they had access to the swimming pool on the Titanic, chances are that there's water still there.
Legend still says there's still water in it. But joking aside, of course.
You beat me to the joke. I was going to say it, but you beat me to the punch.
Sorry. Alright, serious time now. There's actually a bulkhead, a watertight door that actually separates the swimming pool from the Turkish baths. And basically, once they close that off, it's closed off for good.
Mm.
And of course, what we just previously saw was the RMS Olympic, which is Titanic's sister ship. And they're about 500 nautical miles away, and they were sailing from on a New York to Southampton route, and they just recently picked up the distress signal. Now, what actually kind of works for distress signals, if it's relayed to another ship, and if they have good signal, and if that ship starts transmitting, and if another ship hears it, it basically relayed back to the Olympic. So they kind of understood what's going on, and they're like, yeah, we got to get there quick as we can.
Now, I've seen that above the crow's nest, there was a light that's still flickering. Can they share what this light was about?
Oh, that's basically a masthead. Mast
Right.
light, excuse me. Usually they would be lit with an oil lamp. So basically, if you're another ship and if you or further away, if you see a masthead, it basically tells you there's a ship within the area.
I was gonna say the flashing looks a little too irregular for it to be a Morse lamp.
Because I always thought that the oil lamp was back on the mast on the stern, not on the bow, but there we go. Because there's one theory that suggests that the oil lamp did burn bright after the breakup for about like 15 to 20 seconds or less than that. And then there was another theory said that the oil lamp was there, but it remained on and continued on between the breakup, and then it was probably still on when the ship made her final plunge. Now, I don't know how true this is or how it is false, but this is just what I know.
Now we have Lifeboat 6 being lower. Now this one has a story of its own as well. Inside the lifeboat is basically one Margaret Brown, who boarded the Titanic from Cherbourg, who was actually on her way to Denver, Colorado. And of course there is a museum out there, so shout out to the Molly Brown Museum out there. So basically, she's basically one of the most unsung heroes of the Titanic. And basically, her and a quartermaster by the name of Robert Hickens kind of had like a verbal spat towards each other. And I believe before the lowering of the lifeboat or after, he would actually comment about Margaret Brown saying, of all the lifeboats she has beyond, why does she have to be on mine?
In my boat! I still love this quote because it really shows how annoyed he actually was. But I could say, though, in a female perspective, yeah, I wouldn't probably let him get away with that. But if I was a boy...
I'm Molly Brown on this one.
Yeah, if I was a boy, I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I sort of know where you're coming from. But not always, really. But I know that Robert Hitchens has a descendant, Simon, who talks about Robert all the time. And it's really fascinating to see in Simon's point of view about Robert's conflict with Margaret, but yeah, I can really see them having a ding-dong match later on after the sinking. I really would. If the two of them ever cross paths again, the debate would have continued, I would have guessed. Now, there's the Major in there, Major Puchin. So when lifeboat number 6 was launched, someone cried out that they hadn't got a sailor in the boat. And Second Officer Charles Lightoller, who was lowering lifeboat number 6, asked, "Does anyone have any experience on board on how to row a boat?" And Major Puchin, I hope I got it right, said, "I've got experiences, I'm a yachtsman." And Lightoller said, "Okay, you better get into the boat." And the Major did, swan down from the boat deck and climbed himself all the way down into the lifeboat, dropping his wallet in the water in the process. And he was the only man that Second Officer Charles Lightoller allowed to be in a boat that night.
There goes another distress rocket just then.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And how the mangled wreck of Titanic did not land on that wallet is beyond me.
Well, the wallets were buoyant, obviously.
Definitely, and the wallet was recovered as well.
Is being suspiciously quiet, which means he's up to no good somewhere.
Oh no, is Sonny up to his old tricks?
Yes.
Cat's always planning world domination.
It's his house, we just live in it.
That reminds me, I think I need to check on my voids.
Voids!
Voids? Oh, you mean your boys, Smokey and Cubby? I think that's a yes. Yeah.
I will take that as
Yes,
a
apparently. I'll check.
Lovely cats.
But we do love our animals on History Inside a Nutshell. We really, really do love our animals. We've never known anyone who isn't an animal lover. Oh no, but thinking of animals actually breaks my heart now, knowing that most of the animals didn't survive the sinking. Aww.
On the note of third-class passengers being held back, if I recall correctly, toward the very end of the sinking, there were reports of pistol shots being fired, but not at anyone.
Yes, that is very 100% true. But we'll probably discuss on the third class passengers, because I did mention on that a little bit. But we'll probably have to get to the controversial lifeboat as well. Our DK said even though he'll be right back, he was gonna probably miss it. Now at 1 a.m. A lifeboat number 1, DK's covered this on his channel already, which I will send a link to. Lifeboat number 1 was the lifeboat that only had 12 people, and that included a few crewmen and the Duff Gordons. And it's become controversial because not only it was the only lifeboat to have the least number of occupants, but it was also the one that it was rumoured, which would later accuse the Duff Gordons, especially I've forgotten his first name now. Lord Duff Gordon, who actually bribed the crew members to keep quiet about the lifeboat. But in actuality, he gave the crewmen £5 for the things that they lost in the sinking. And then
the actual number would be 5 passengers and 7 crew members.
Yeah, that's it.
And that reminded me, I grabbed my Histobrick model of lifeboat number 1, and it does include 12 figures.
And we just seen another distress rocket go off just a couple of moments ago.
Oh yeah,
I found one.
definitely.
I found one of my toys. I don't know where the other one is.
Kitty! Yeah, I'm not sure where my little orange menace is, but he'll be back soon, no doubt.
But yeah, so another like point out for lifeboat number 12. But what happened was that Lady Duff Gordon became the only woman in the British inquiry of the Titanic to be interviewed, and she got a huge amount of backlash, not from the inquiry, but from the press.
Oh, Ida and Isidore Strauss, this story breaks my heart every time.
Oh, so does mine. Oh, but this is like a really, really special story because Isidore and Ida Strauss were a very devoted couple, and I have done some research on them. And it was love at first sight. It was a whirlwind romance, but 40 years later, they were always still together. And Isidore was offered a seat in the lifeboat because of his age, even though he was a man. Isidore reportedly said, "No,
No
I
thanks.
will not go into the lifeboat because I don't want any more women and children to take my place." And then, hearing this, Ida, who was about to board a lifeboat number 8, stepped off and she said, "No, I am not leaving you." And
They were best of friends.
yeah, besties until the end. So, and she actually said the line, "We've been living together for many years. Where you go, I go." And even a lot of people try to argue with her, including Archibald Gracie, who wrote a very long, detailed account, as well as Hugh Waller. They both really wrote detailed accounts about the Strausses. And Ida still would not budge, even in the last moments of the sinking, when the last lifeboats were being like launched. Ida still refused, and they were last reportedly seen in the deck chairs holding hands. But there was one account that was written to one of Isidore and Ida's sons that said that someone saw the Strausses being swept away by the sea by a very violent rogue wave.
They, of course, were very successful in their own right. They were Isidore was one of the founders of Macy's.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And he just
Yes,
became
true.
a very wealthy man. Yeah.
And for all the sinkings that we did cover, this would also be. There was also one with the Irvings with the Empress of Ireland, and another one which is the Hubbards for the Lusitania as well.
Mm.
You can kind of guess the theme for all three of those.
Oh yeah, like romance right there.
Lovers until the end.
Till death do us part. Yep, that's my doggy.
Arf.
Told you this part was gonna be loud. Oh no, that's lifeboat number 12. That's just coming. No, not
actually.
lifeboat number 12. No, 1.
Where's 8. We're on the port side now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we
Oh
are.
my. Yeah, we'll probably go back to the third class passengers, like you mentioned before, Travis, because there were multiple accounts about the debatable topics of when the third class passengers were rumoured to be locked down, and there were a few accounts that said yes, that did happen, and I did use them for the book, especially one account where during the like locked in, where some of the crew members were looking at the passengers who tried to persuade them to get out. There was one story where a man held a piece of ice and he actually showed it to the crew members saying, see this, in different language. We don't know what language it was, but the stewards were like, sorry, but you're going to have to wait your turn. But it is still debatable because our friends at Titanic, Honor and Glory said that never happened. But even though we agree to this, accounts say otherwise. And from what I've read, it was kind of like a misunderstanding on like different parts there. But again, I could be wrong. But with the accounts that I read, it's really interesting to see how things did react. But most of the passengers said that most of the stewards either gave misinterpretations, wrong instructions, or probably just didn't really think that a disaster was going to happen. Hence why there's the myth of locking the third class passengers down below. But what do you guys think? Do you really think this happened? Please share your thoughts in the comments, or if you're in the live premiere chat, just share your thoughts as well.
I think it's just accounts that got caught up in the chaos of it all toward the very end.
Agreed.
There's basically one account that I'm actually looking at. This came from a survivor named Daniel Buckley, who was actually on the Titanic. He actually did testify that he did saw a crew member come down and shout at the passengers to get their life belts on. Buckley actually went up to the boat deck as fast as he can, and he was actually among a group of steerage passengers who actually did force their way through a locked gate.
And then by around that time, 1 a.m., most third class passengers were in the men's smoking room at third class. But then when they saw the water, they had to rush up to the boat deck, and most of the steerage passengers came up between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m.
Oh, that's just spooky.
Yeah, that's first class now.
It's like a ghost town. You're in that hall, you just hear nothing except for the steel and the metal just groaning and moaning.
And maybe the band from above. I think it's more or less now that she's taking on just about an even keel, if I'm not mistaken.
This would be at the time that the steel coal bunker wall actually did give way. Now, what we did saw earlier when the Titanic was kind of bumping along the iceberg, it actually tore a hole about maybe the size of 2 sheets of paper into a coal bunker for boiler room number 5. Now, it did held for so long, but unfortunately, due to the 20,000 gallons of water that was actually inside the coal bunker, it was actually not designed to hold in water. It wasn't actually designed to be watertight.
Right.
And there you go. That's the result.
And yeah, looking at her bow on, it looks like she's just about evened out.
And this is the point where we have our first 2 Titanic victims claimed, Jonathan Shepard and Herbert Harvey. Now, how did this happen? Well, they were trying to pump out the water and try to delay as much of the sinking as possible. But however, when they were lifting up a manhole to get the hoses into boiler room number 6, Jonathan Shepard, who wasn't actually watching where he was going, fell feet first into the hole, thus breaking both of his ankles, and he had to be taken out and put into the pump room. And then, of course, with the coal bunker for boiler room number 5 gave way, it swept him away, and Herbert Harvey tried going back for him, and both would never be seen again. And this is from fireman Frederick Barrett, who was actually in that boiler room around that time. So this is the second time that Frederick Barrett avoided death so far. I gotta play the lottery.
Yeah, he cheated death 3 times, didn't he?
That he did.
I'm guessing this is like the firemen's quarters. So, so spooky. Oh, yeah, spooky.
Extremely.
Could definitely listen to the music all night if I can. Even though I've gone after midnight.
It's just such a pleasant tune.
Definitely.
A pleasant
it
tune
comes-
while we're watching a ship going down.
That's coming up to a point now where the musicians take a break from playing music because some of them have helped many passengers into the lifeboats, and that was recorded under one testimony where I think it was either Wallace Hartley or one of the other band members who helped assisted one of the second class ladies into the lifeboats. And a few of the musicians have helped passengers at getting their life belts on. But there's a really good book called Those Brave Fellows, again by George Behe. Really worth recommending. I'll definitely put a link to that book in the description box down below. And apologies if I sound a bit grouchy, I feel so tired.
All good, all good.
Well, that's what happens when you have a different time zone. I wish I had the same time zone as you guys.
In all fairness, I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning on my side, so...
Ouch.
Yeah!
Oh, same here.
Hey! Early risers!
Yep.
Okay, so we are going into the last hours of the Titanic's life.
And now the downward pitch is becoming quite noticeable.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And the band is still jaunty as ever.
Good old Beethoven.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where all, no pun intended, all hell breaks loose.
Indeed.
There are definitely no words to describe how these 4 lifeboats that are in line together, ready to be launched or lowered. It's just so scary.
What's also scary is how quickly the sinking is accelerated by now.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so water reaches boiler room number 4 as well as the second row of portholes underneath Titanic's bow nameplate, so it's not going to be very long before the name actually goes under the water. But I'm kind of like wondering, with the lifeboats being launched, how they managed to be launched safely, since the Titanic's just like had a very, very not a very stable angle.
Isn't each davit controlled independently, I think?
Right, okay.
Because I think Britannics were all electrically controlled, but I think on Titanic they were mostly, if not all, manually controlled.
Yeah, definitely. That's correct, really, because all the davits on the Titanic were just like made being lowered by human hands.
Right.
But with the Britannic, definitely some of them were electronic, just because they had to get all the lifeboats down quicker, especially with that incident during the sinking with the propellers turning.
Well, that's just terrifying.
Yeah, just under 200 passengers and crew members. But must have been more terrifying is that some of the men and women and the children, they would have, some of them would jump into the lifeboats while they're being lowered. Can you imagine how scary would that be? Especially with the fear about not.
Sonny. Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
Sonny's returned.
Yes, he has. Hey, buddy.
Hello, Sonny. Hey, Sonny, baby.
Oh, he's such a good boy.
Yes, he is. Oh,
He's chilling with his dad.
very handsome boy.
He's
Cat
such a
moments.
handsome kitty. He's such a
there we-
handsome kitty cat.
Oh, can I take Sonny home with me? Can he come over across the pond?
He can come visit, but he's my kitty. Oh, and he give his daddy cat kisses too.
Oh,
And he's had his
It was
fill of cat
insane.
cuddles for now.
sorry, DK. Go ahead.
Well, we need to say more about that fact. Of course, Lifeboat 16 would have one notable figure, and she's a huge household name, is Violet Jessup. She actually boarded the Titanic as stewardess, but she also previously worked on the first sister ship to the Titanic with the RMS Olympic, and of course, she was on there around that time when the Hawk collided into the Olympic. And here we are on the Titanic. Little did she know she would be involved in one of the worst maritime tragedies of all time. Now, she did escape in lifeboat number 16, but here's that big but, no pun intended. A officer, who I believe it is 6th Officer James Moody,
Correct.
handed her a baby to look after throughout the sinking of the Titanic, and of course up until the Carpathia arrived on scene. When the Carpathia arrived on scene, AS, who I believe presumed it was the baby's mother, found her baby and snatch out of Violet Jessup's hands without even saying a word. And of course, she would end up on the HMHS Britannic. And as the story goes, and I know Jake mentioned this a dozen times, whenever you're on a sinking ship, always carry your toothbrush with you.
Yeah.
Yep, can't argue with that logic.
No, even Violet's brother actually reminded, saying, "Don't forget your toothbrush, sis." I love
she is a great household name.
Yeah, definitely.
And I believe it was during an interview with the author, I think, let me look. It was John Maxtone Graham, and luckily I do have the book, The Only Way to Cross. She actually did recall getting a phone call saying that one night asking, and is this the do you know of the baby that was handed to you on the Titanic? And she said yes, and presumably the person on the other end said, "I am that baby," and hung up. And she actually never spoke about that, and her husband thought it was basically a prank caller, which is pretty common.
Still, wow.
Yep.
And there's the Californian.
Yep.
Oh, but fun fact as well, John Maxtone Graham had a relative who was actually one of the writers on The Simpsons. And I think it was his son, from what I can remember, but I can't really put my tongue on the subject. But I mean, if you do know, let me know in the comments. Well, all I know is there is a Maritime and a Simpsons connection. Dagmar's quote is just heartbreaking. But it's just one of many accounts, especially from the women of the Titanic, knowing that they've lost very close relatives, including husbands.
It's an hour to live.
Well, actually, with the fact if it's 1:25 a.m., 55 minutes now. And you can still see that the capacity wasn't really full at all. In fact, there was only few lifeboats that were actually full. But I can't remember which lifeboat was the fullest one. Does anyone know?
It would be 15. 15 was the only lifeboat to be lowered at beyond capacity. You have to keep this in mind though, these lifeboats, they're only built for 65 passengers, except for the collapsible and the emergency lifeboats 1 and 2, which they can only hold 40.
It's a great visual.
Yeah, that's the Cafe Parisian now.
With the visual of the lifeboat clouding the windows, that's just grim.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the lifeboat was just being lowered that way as well. And by then you can just tell how serious this thing is now. I'm probably thinking if you could see some of the rooms from that view from your lifeboat, you would think, oh my god. But would people feel knowing that there was a great height between the ship and the water? The height must have been terrifying.
Being that close to it, yes. And also seeing the propellers off of the stern, yes.
Oh, that was mentioned. Charlotte Collier's account says, women and children first. Someone was shouting these last few words over and over again. They meant for my own safety, but also meant the greatest loss I've ever suffered, the life of my husband. And that was mentioned in the video of Charlotte's testimony that I mentioned earlier. And it's just one of these few words that are very haunting and attracted many people who had PTSD. And then by then, only half of the lifeboats, even though most of them weren't of full capacity, they just left. Now, if they were to be of full capacity, all of them, how many passengers would be on board altogether? Or how many would have gotten off?
And it's
Yeah.
the math's pretty simple. They were each built for what, 65?
Yeah, every single one of them is built for 65, except for the collapsibles, which are, they can only fill 40, and lifeboats 1 and 2, 40 as well. So basically, these lifeboats, it's only enough for half the passengers on board. And you have to keep this in mind, though, these lifeboats were not meant as a way to hold the whole entire population of a ship out in the ocean. They were actually meant for transporting passengers from a sinking or a disabled ship to a rescue ship. Basically, ferrying lifeboats from one ship to another.
Right. So, yeah, half of the people was more than enough capacity by regulations at the time.
Yeah, the laws were completely different at the time. And it's all about tonnage. Basically, for Titanic's case, she carried 20 lifeboats. She did met the law.
And that's the special lifeboat number 14. That was led by Harold Lowe. Now, actually, I'm wrong. It wasn't Harold Lowe. It was someone else. But oh, that's just me talking because I'm tired. Anyway, so lifeboat 13 and lifeboat 15. That is the most shocking story I've ever heard, and I will repeat that because it is just the most shocking story ever. Now, lifeboat 13 required a few occupants, and these occupants were the Cardwell family, Al, Sylvia, and Alden. And they were second-class passengers, and they had no intention to get off the Titanic, but they came across a stoker, and I have spoken with Al's great niece, and we both agreed that stoker was Frederick Barrett. And when he found that the Cardwells were intending to stay on, he said to the family, if you value your life, get off the ship. I have seen water coming to flood in the boiler rooms, and this ship will go down. So that convinced the Cardwells to step into lifeboat 13, and that was when it was lowered away. At the same time, lifeboat 15 was being launched, and lifeboat 15 consisted of one main survivor, Ruth Becker, who we mentioned earlier, and Ruth Becker became separated from her mother and her siblings, so she had to board that lifeboat all by herself. And lifeboat 13 was so close to being crushed by lifeboat 15 because it was lowered directly underneath lifeboat 15, but luckily they were rescued in time by none other than Frederick Barrett, who, with quick thinking, cut the tangled ropes between the two lifeboats before a disaster could be avoided. So Frederick Barrett saved many lives, including the Cardwells. And the story between lifeboat 13 and 15 is one of my favourites, and the story of the Cardwell family is one of my favourite Titanic stories ever. And that's when we hear some revolvers going off.
Yeah, I want to go over something else. For the past hour, we've actually seen Titanic sink at an even keel. Now she's actually leaning to her port side. Now, the question is, how's that happening? Well, Charles Lightoller ordered some men to go down to the D-deck gangway door and open it from there to let more passengers in, and these crewmen would never ever be seen again. And what happened is, when the Titanic is going down lower and lower into the water, that water would actually make its way into the D-deck reception area, thus causing more water to have more access inside. And basically, with that door being open, it let the water have new access ways in, just to completely bypass the bulkheads to more areas of the ship. This would also include the dining room, which is one of the biggest spacious rooms on board the ship, to which it will contribute. And here we go, we got 15 coming down onto where 13 is.
Oh, it said that people that were on board was 68, but the full capacity that lifeboat can take was 65.
A couple extras wouldn't be that much of an issue. And for our American friends watching, this is the Star Spangled Banner, which is being played right now. And hard to believe this, around this time, in 1912, it was not the United States national anthem up until, and I'm going to see if I can find it. Let's see, written by Francis Scott Key on September 14th of 1814, when he witnessed bombardment of Fort McHenry by the British Royal Navy during the Battle of Baltimore in the War of 1812. And of course, it was adopted on March 3rd, 1931.
Oh, so probably like 20 years.
Sung to the tune of a classic drinking song, the Anacreontic song.
Say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the great.
So,
Very nice, well done.
the fun fact of the Star Spangled Banner is one reason it's notoriously hard to sing among national anthems is because it's a drinking song. It's not to the tune of what you can sing, it's what you think you can sing. gotta
Yeah,
say,
if you
on the
hear-
same hand, when sung properly, it sounds awesome.
Believe me, if you actually do hear that during a World Cup match from years in the future, it is wow.
So the Olympic was believed to be further away from the Titanic at the time of the Olympic trying to rush to the Titanic's aid. But had she been a little bit later to find the passengers, she would have been about like half an hour to arrive half an hour before the Carpathia did. And here we go. This is the almost incident between 13 and 15. Yeah, that is true. That the people on land couldn't hear the wireless signals from the Titanic anymore because the power was nearly going off and they had to put the emergency power on probably nearer the time. And there was a lot of things that were going on inside the wireless cabin at that point because not only Jack Phillips had to deal with a serious backlog of messages because he didn't really get sleep for about 24 hours, and then Jack Phillips continued to work very hard, and there was lots of things going on in the wireless cabin. Harold Bride had to attend a woman who was not feeling herself, and towards the end of the sinking, they had to deal with a stoker who tried to steal Jack Phillips's jacket. But when we remember, we will probably come back to the story later on. And there we go. This is the incident.
The almost incident.
The almost incident. And there we go. Frederick Barrett saves the day by this close.
I've known we actually seen this in the past with the Lusitania with Lifeboat 9 landing up on top of 11. That almost could have been that situation.
Because the Lusitania one was didn't really end too well.
It didn't. It was quick before it was over.
So the propellers rising up out of the water is such a spooky visual.
Yeah, if you ever watch the video, this sinking animation, if you actually crank this video up into the highest definition, you can actually see the 401 on the propeller blades.
Oh, wow. Just over half an hour to go.
Row, that's it. Keep rowing. Keep pulling. You have to get away from the ship before the suction pulls us down. Row!
And speaking of the suction, Archibald Gracie's survival account is one of the craziest I've read of the entire sinking.
Definitely. I mean, he really goes into like full detail of not only just his own experiences, but the experiences about the people around him. Because I think he did interview survivors later on, not only aboard the Carpathia, but later on in documents and letters, from what I understand.
He did, and yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he was basically blasted off of the ship from a big blast of hot air from somewhere in between, or else it would have sucked him down.
He did, and then what happens that the ice froze his hair and his moustache as well as like the whole of his body, and he was frozen all over his body, but he would die of hypothermia not until just before Christmas of that year, 1912. So shocking, and he was only in his 50s.
Yeah, he was fairly young.
I think he had like probably a little bit of diabetes, so his like health condition with that didn't really help.
That's probably the last thing you want to hear on your wireless.
Power's nearly going down and all the chairs in D-Deck. Oof. That's a sight you don't really want to see if you are... Well, if you're doomed.
I was saying, if you're seeing this sight, it's already too late.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and basically, your access way is actually through those doors, ironically, where it's now officially darker. Now we can actually see that the power is actually starting to fade away. And this is only the beginning parts.
The beginning of the end.
Indeed.
This actually reminds me of... Do you know the deleted scene from Titanic where it's the 13-minute long scene of Lovejoy trying to assassinate Rose and then Jack saves her? That kind of reminds me of that for some reason. Looking at the scene in the...
The fight between Lovejoy and Jack.
Yeah, that's the one.
Actually,
I still like the... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I actually did found the note. Basically, for that deleted scene alone, it was actually deleted in post, and this is the reason why. I'm actually quoting this from the book. Audiences hated this scene. Even when I was writing it, I knew it was a bit of a forced excursion, but I thought audiences would want to see Jack being heroic and winning out against Lovejoy. Of course, after it was shot, the scene has its own reasons for staying in. It was visually impressive. And reading the second test audience comments, I realized that by introducing guns and fistfights, I had committed a tonal violation. Audiences didn't want the additional jeopardy because they were so completely focused on the dangers of the sinking, so that scene had to come out. Now, that was actually the main reason why it was deleted, and also, if you actually notice later on Sinking, when Titanic was breaking apart in two, or starting to, you can actually see blood coming from Lovejoy's head. Most people thought, what happened? How did this happen? This deleted scene was the reason why, because Jack actually took Lovejoy's head, and I'm not trying to be graphic, bashed it against a glass window.
That's just reminding me of the bit from the Super 3D parody where they dropped a stormtrooper into that scene and he's blasting away at Jack while screaming, "Drop your weapon!"
So the engine room getting flooded is probably what the Titanic must have told the wireless operators, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could definitely see more lifeboats being lowered slowly. But I didn't really know they did show this in the 2013. Oh no, not 2013. The 2023 sinking animation. I'm not too sure if they actually showed this beforehand, but I know in last year's version, the 2024 one, they showed people um, like threatening to use guns if men went into the boats. Now, who can tell me a bit more about that, or who can share more about that?
From what I understand, there were accounts of pistol shots, but none directed at anyone.
I think for that one, that sounds like a kind of a Lusitania story of a passenger threatening a crew member to lower away a lifeboat. There was actually no recollection of a passenger on the Titanic getting shot. If there were gunshots, they were basically warning shots because panic was brewing on the ship.
Indeed. And it was around that time that Captain Smith put out his megaphone and recalled most of the ships to pull back to put more passengers, but most of them refused to go back apart from one. And that was lifeboat number 2. And I don't think Titanic Honor and Glory showed it in any of their animations. But I know that Tom Linsky and his channel team of Part-Time Explorer did. And Titanic Honor and Glory team, they didn't mention the gangway door being open. So who can say more about that gangway door being open?
I think I mentioned that one previously. Basically, the gangway door is basically one of those big doors that basically allows passengers in from the dock. It was used at Southampton, and of course, like I mentioned, it was actually open during the sinking, and it was left open because they thought that because what they thought, or what Lightoller thought, passengers can actually use this doorway just to have passengers get into the lifeboats. But what they actually do not know is when the ship got further and further down, and once it touched the door frame of that gangway door, it allowed water to have new meanings to get in. Basically what we saw with the D-deck reception room and of course the dining room.
And then we're looking at the private promenade deck there, similar to what it was shown on Titanic.
And yep, there's the light starting to flicker.
Yep. I believe these would be the private promenade deck for, I think, Joseph Bruce Ismay, because he had B-52, 54, and 56.
Yeah, because originally that was supposed to be J.P. Morgan suites.
Yes, but J.P. Morgan opted out of that. There's actually some notable figures that did miss the Titanic's departure at Southampton. One of them, I actually know this real well, is Milton S. Hershey.
Right.
Who actually did miss the departure of Titanic because he had some last-minute business meetings to attend to, and he lucked out big time. I believe there's the check that was actually made out to the White Star Line at the Hershey's Chocolate Museum up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and Hershey's chocolate was very infamous for all the lovely chocolate. But I have to admit, I never tried Hershey's chocolate, but I don't know if they have it in the UK.
It's nothing special.
Fair enough. It's the same like Cadbury's in the UK, but it's.
I prefer Cadbury's to Hershey's. Full disclosure.
Oh yeah, true. So, which flavour did you prefer, Travis?
I prefer just the regular standard dairy milk myself, but The Caramello has become actually surprisingly popular here lately.
Oh yeah, Caramel's the best. Oh, and there's another distress rocket fired. And there's a view of the Californian.
California is still just kind of there.
And that's the final distress rocket.
And they still hadn't put the 2 and 2 together.
Nope.
I could imagine they actually noted it in the log, saying a ship was stopped, it was looking queer, and it was firing rockets.
Something weird was happening.
And with nearly being at 2 o'clock in the morning, ship's time, this is when all like chaos would soon break. Yeah, that's a really sad story about the Astors because Madeline, who was about 5 months pregnant, only got married to John Jacob Astor, who was the most richest man on the ship. And she was kind of like scared about not going on. And at the beginning, before they boarded the first lifeboat, it was the only chance that John Jacob Astor would get if the pair of them would have boarded. But if Astor had survived, he would be like humiliated by the press, definitely. And when they got to go into a lifeboat, Lightoller refused to let Astor in, but he let his wife in, Madeline, in, and he asked Lightoller what was the number of the lifeboat. Lightoller gave that, and he went, okay, that's fine. And then as the lifeboat was being lowered, Astor told his wife Madeline, keep your hands in your pockets, it's cold out there. And then that was the last they ever saw of each other. And it was rumoured that Astor or one of the other first class passengers was rumoured to have gone down to the dog kennels and released all the remaining dogs on board.
On them.
Yeah, but sadly they didn't really survive, but he did his best.
Good on them for trying.
Yeah, definitely. Only 3 dogs would survive, but only the littlest of ones.
Still better than no dog surviving.
Yeah, definitely. Now imagine like a big dog surviving. Would that cause chaos in the lifeboat?
If it was like a Great Dane, probably not. Great Danes just want to be big couch potatoes.
That's true. There were no border collies on board the Titanic, but...
Oh god, if there were border collies on board, the whole ship would have been rewired.
Yes, true. And that's the third-class dining room.
Which actually doesn't look like a bad space at all.
That's wonderful, that space. But it was much bigger than you realised, but there were dividers that had to be put in just to separate the men, the women and the children, especially for those who weren't travelling together. But if they were families, that was different.
This is that Ken Marshall shot right here, just looking down and just seeing that water coming up.
It is such a disturbing image.
And Scotland Road is nearly flooded completely.
Just about.
I know we haven't brought up this man for quite a while now. Of course, our favorite baker, Charles Yaukin.
Yes, I was hoping somebody would mention that man.
To be fair, I was gonna save him as the best for last, but I think it's quite worth mentioning. He had one of the most craziest survival stories. Basically,
yes,
he
the
was
alcohol preserved him.
Yep, he was supposed to board lifeboat number 10 and basically be in charge of it, but he gave up his seat to. And basically, what his personal mission is, and it's a very unique one, to make sure the Titanic goes down with little alcohol as possible.
My man!
And of course, what we saw with Scotland Road basically went down, go get a drink, come back up, assist passengers, go back down, get another drink, and all of a sudden, there's a massive wall of water coming. It was like, okay, never mind.
All right, time to go.
But it was down there, though, that it was rumoured where he last saw Dr. William O'Loughlin, and it was believed that the doctor didn't survive, and he must have died when Scotland Road was continuing to flood. Poor guy.
This is the captain. Boat 6, return to the ship. This is the captain. Mr. Hobson.
Yep, that's what I meant earlier. The captain was trying to get all ships to come back, but it was a little bit more dramatic than what's put in the animation. But most of the lifeboats refused to go back, apart from lifeboat number 2.
At that point, it's kind of the trolley problem almost, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And the band's just about to play up again. But then, as you listen to the music as time goes on, it just becomes a bit more somber.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse for the sound of my voice, I'm really tired.
My goodness, someone is sleepy.
Yeah, definitely. It's nearly 1 a.m. in the UK.
Yep, and this is the Carpathia story, and it gets me choked up every time I hear about it.
I think around this point that she is now into the same ice field as the Titanic did.
Yep. And it's just something so touching about Rostrid pulling out all the stops, saying, I don't care if nobody's still alive, we're helping as many people as we can, go.
Right, here's another controversial figure we need to bring into the room. J. Bruce Ismay.
I think Ismay was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I agree, but when I interviewed Cliff, Ismay's great nephew, there was one account which I have accepted to believe now that he was actually ordered in by a crew officer as there was one more space in the lifeboat, and that is exactly what I believe, because he didn't deliberately just go in himself. I don't think that was intentional, because that was probably a case of yellow journalism, especially from one person who loathed Ismay. And when that person found out that Ismay survived, he used him as an excuse for media propaganda. I can't remember the life of me what the actual guy's name it was, but these two, him and Ismay, have been rivals for years. And it's made me think, really, that Ismay was never a coward like that at all. And
what I understand is Ismay tried to help.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, he was a passenger, but I don't think Ismay did anything wrong that evening.
No, I don't think he did either. It was kind of like, for example, some men didn't really do wrong, then really, but back in society, back in 1912, men had to be seen as like very strong
Right.
and tough as nails. But you probably won't get that feeling quite now, really, because
And
gone
very
were the days with
gentlemanlike.
stereotypes. Yeah.
I think, from my opinion, I think basically Murdoch ordered Ismay into Collapsible Sea. Because we know the movies basically depicted him, just seizing the opportunity and he gets into a boat. And he would just never look at the officer lowering the boat in the eyes.
But many of the films depicted Ismay deliberately getting into the lifeboat, probably from the 1943 movie that was filmed during World War II, and that's been carrying that tradition ever since.
There is
Oh,
also the trope of him looking away from the ship right before it goes down.
True.
Oh, I know what you're
But
talking about, the
yeah.
1943 Nazi Titanic propaganda film.
Yeah.
That one, we're going to go into huge major discussions about that when the SS Capricorn video is released.
Yeah, because that was the ship that filmed most of the scenes for the 1943 movie, but we won't go into spoilers.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, the ship sinks.
And another spoiler, some of those scenes from the 1943 film was used in the A Night to Remember film.
It was.
Also, spoiler alert, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Gotta use a Star Wars reference.
I had to.
Oh, this story makes me really sad. So, Caroline Brown and Edith Evans were one of the two female companions that accompanied Archibald Gracie. And Archibald Gracie was known to be like very caring towards the women, especially women who were traveling solo. He was kind of like a chaperone to them. And there were a few of the women in the group. Well, in the group, there were a few women who were related sisters, and they went to England as they had to attend a family funeral. And they bumped into Gracie when they were in Southampton, and then they all travelled together. But unfortunately, one of the women, which was Caroline Brown, died in the sinking because she offered her lifeboat space to Edith Evans, because Caroline simply had no one, and she said to Edith, "You go, you got a family, and you need to get to them." And so Edith did, and even though Caroline said she'll get into the next lifeboat, she never did. Tragic, really, when you think about it.
Meanwhile, as the Carpathia is steaming towards Titanic, Rostron has basically pulled the maritime version of divert all power from life support to engines. He is pulling every ounce of steam away from everything except the kitchens to fire up the engines.
Definitely. Now,
It really
collapsible
does.
lifeboat. Yeah, so Collapsible Lifeboat D is considered the last ship to be successfully launched from the Titanic, but it's got the story of the Navratil brothers. Now, DK, you know this one very well, don't you? So I'll let you lead on that one.
Oh, yes. And also another Star Trek reference. Number 1, divert all the steam power into the engines. Alright, anyway, back seriousness on this one. Yes, the Navratil brothers, this was a very unique pair. So basically, what actually did happen was basically that they were living with their mother at the time frame, which was Marcel. They had a divorced father, which was Michel Navratil. what actually did happen was basically she let the boys go see their father during the Easter weekend, and he actually did not return her with the boys. So basically what happened was they went from Nice, France to London, England, thus actually kidnapping the two boys. And they booked passage on board the RMS Titanic under fake alias names. I think the father was Lewis Hoffman, and I'm trying to remember the last two. I know I got a book somewhere that actually does cover. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Got it in my hand, and of course this was actually just covered in the story of the Titanic. And here we are. Here we go. Michel Navratil, who was actually a tailor from France. He did travel under the false name of Louis Hoffman with his sons Michel and Edmond. And he was actually separated from his wife, and his son stayed with him for the Easter weekend. And they actually boarded as second-class passengers. And the fake alias that actually did came was that their mother died before the ship even left Southampton, and we know that was actually false. And of course, during the sinking of the Titanic, what they were basically doing was they were trying to desperately search for a spaceport lifeboat so that way his sons could be saved. And considering this, what he actually did was pure negligence of life. If he would have survived the Titanic and gotten a boat, he wouldn't worry about the water killing him. He'd be worried about the mother going after him. So he was actually lucky that the water took his own life rather than her, because she would have ripped him apart.
Indeed.
And luckily, both boys did survive. I think Michel actually lived a longer life, and unfortunately Edmond did not live long. I believe he died in the mid-40s. Michel was actually present when P.H. Nargeolet supervised the lifting of the big piece, and P.H. actually did an interview with Michel Navratil as well, and he would eventually see his father's grave for the first time at Halifax. Now, ironically enough, Michel Navratil traveled under a Jewish surname and was buried in the Jewish section for the Titanic victims. However, when autopsy reports that he was a Frenchman under Navratil, they actually let him, stay buried over at the Jewish area.
And this shot right there is also reference to another painting, and was that Ken Marshall again?
I think so.
Yes, this is another one as well. This is basically time is running out.
$2:10.
10 minutes to go. Now, I'll probably have to make this point here because this is getting up to the very important event, and this is argued to be one of the most important lifeboats within the Titanic story, because a lot of people think the most important lifeboat was the closest one, lifeboat number 2, lifeboat number 4. No, that's not true, because the most important boat was collapsible lifeboat B, and as we're going to see in a minute in the animation, when it was launched, it got flipped around upside down, and it was trying to be launched after it got cut the ropes by Second Officer Charles Lightoller, but he didn't really have a penknife, so Steward Sidney Daniels, who was passing through the time, gave Lightoller the penknife to cut through the ropes, and beforehand Lightoller decided to stay on board because he was ordered to get into another lifeboat to assist rowing, and in response to Chief Officer Henry Wild's order, Charles Lightoller shouted, "Not bloody well likely," and he just stayed on the ship hoping to go down. And when the boat flipped upside down, it landed on top of junior wireless operator Harold Bride, and it floated away after Bride became separated from his friend, senior wireless operator Jack Phillips. And both of them swam over to the collapsible boat, but they didn't realise that the pair were on the same collapsible lifeboat. But it's quoted that Jack Phillips was quite chatty to Second Officer Charles Lightoller about who was coming to rescue them. And sadly, Phillips would die on the boat, and probably he would die of hypothermia since he was long in the water, but because of the lack of sleep he got, it was just impossible for him to stay away.
Here's
And
your
there's one of
icon
the-
today.
That's it. And here's collapsible lifeboat B. And it goes upside down. And it's also around the same time that Coltrane James McGann, who was also an important person to be on top of collapsible lifeboat B, and a handful of others would witness the final moments of Captain Smith. Now, everyone believes that the captain went down on the bridge with the Titanic, which is not true. And it has been officially confirmed, first by us and now by historian Daniel, aka Dan Jones, who is the presenter for History Hit, and I'm so glad he mentioned this. I'm going to give this a History Hit and Dan Jones a huge shout out, because I'm so happy that they did that, and they stuck with James McGann and Isaac Maynard's accounts. Isaac Maynard as the cook, who also survived in collapsible lifeboat B. James McGann was actually next to Captain Smith at the time, but the final moments of them were the captain took a child, and so did James McGann, and both dived into the sea, and the captain was last seen in the water swimming towards collapsible lifeboat B, trying to save as many children from the water as he possibly could. But then the captain went down with the ship, whether it was by suction or if he just got tired of exhaustion, we do not know for sure. But all the children that were attempted to be saved, they didn't make it. And then there we go. That's the end of Near My God City.
And this is where we see the ship level out.
Mm. And then
Gentlemen,
also-
it has been a privilege playing with you tonight.
Yeah, indeed. And then also it's the point where Second Officer Charles Lightoller and Colonel Archibald Gracie both got sucked down, but then they rose back up again. They actually went down with the Titanic, but then they rose up again to do the collapsible boat. And that was around this time that Lightoller would rise above the water first.
I don't know if you actually noticed this, but if you notice the davit cranes for Lifeboat 1, it's in its upright position, just like the same way that we've seen going down to the wreck site. It still is up position to this very day. That's basically a huge testament.
It's amazing just how much of the wreck is still
Recognizable.
in the same exactly, yeah.
And the bow is still its recognizable shape. The stern scans today looks like a missile dropped on it.
Right, I mean, yeah, it looks like someone dropped a bomb on it. And even more so with the more recent images. Yeah, in her own way, she's still a beautiful ship, even down there.
And here we go. Here's the final moments. Here comes the final plunge. Now, it's also very important to bear in mind, really, because the two funnels are going to be off. Charles Lightoller um, escaped death by trying to avoid the first funnel when it collapsed, and just like what we see now, and then a second funnel collapses not long after, and James McGann and Jack Thayer also cheated death by escaping the second funnel. Not too sure what happened with the rest, but I think there's a good chance that Sidney Daniels managed to get away before any of the funnels would collapse on top of him.
And right about here, also the grand staircase implodes.
Mm.
Yeah, a lot is happening at this moment. There goes the second funnel, to which
Yeah,
Jack
here's the
Thayer
second.
did describe going down in a shower of sparks.
And this is the point where the breakup would actually occur. Now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of digging into this, but soon the History Inside
The
a
lights go
Nutshell
out for the last
will
time, and
actually
then-
do a breakup theory of the whole Titanic breakup at some point, so stay tuned for that.
And there she goes.
Total structural integrity destruction.
Okay. The double bottom still holds there for a moment.
And then most people on the accounts saw that the Titanic's 3 sections broke apart rather than 2, which I have to agree with that. And the oil lamp at the very back, yeah, it still glows for a longer time after the breakup.
That's the most menacing iceberg I've ever seen. Just looking at
Right.
the handiwork.
He's
That
just
it did.
standing there menacingly.
Now, I don't know whose account mentioned that the full funnel remained on board intact until the stern section went down, but I don't know who survival account actually mentioned that. I would love to know about it though. So if you guys know, let me know, or let everyone know in the comment section or in the live premiere chat. Yep, and the oil lamp would burn bright until the whole...
Mr. Ismay, I did not see her go down.
Oh yeah, Sanderson Smith with J. Bruce Ismay.
It would be April 19th that the United States Senate inquiries into the Titanic disaster would begin in New York.
Yeah, with the oil lamp just still burning as the stern went down, I definitely agree with that theory. I really do. But again, I can't remember which accounts did that. If you guys know, just let us know in the live premiere chat or in the comments.
That is
And this is
every
where-
single air pocket collapsing.
Oh yeah, the air pockets were really, really huge during like the final moments. And that's where our baker, Chelsea Alkin, would be on the very end.
Just rides it like an elevator.
Oh yes. Now this is also a reference to a newspaper illustration by a man called Charles Dixon, and that was sketched probably around 1914 or a little bit earlier than that, but I can't remember. But there's a still shot which probably might be shown, but it was shown in last year's rendition, the 2014, but in 2013 it would have been like different. But it's beautifully haunting with the illustration, but that is a reference to Charles Dixon's illustration. There we go, that's it.
Well, that's just spooky.
This is it.
I know, right?
It's just, the stern just rises up in the air like a finger pointing up to the sky. There's basically, I believe 31 accounts did say the stern went nearly vertical before going all the way down.
And here come the screams. Still makes my spine shiver.
Honestly, I'd rather hear the ship tearing itself apart than the people screaming.
And also I want to give a shout out to, because James McGann's ancestors, Paul McGann and Stephen McGann, both actors who you'll recognise as the Eighth Doctor in Doctor Who, and also Dr. Turner in Call the Midwife. They did a podcast episode series of the Titanic, and again I will leave that in the description box down below, which goes into more of James, but then also more of the history of the Titanic. And I have listened to the episodes, and it's a high recommendation to listen. So I will leave both. I will leave a link to the post of the episode in the description box below. And also a big huge shout out to Paul and Stephen to say a massive big thank you to do research for James. And I think at the time of recording we reached over 300 views of James McGann video, which was really surprised. So thank you so much for all your support.
And just like that, 2:20 a.m., Titanic slips under the ocean.
Gone for good. And she wouldn't really be seen again until 73 years later.
She would still be heard for a little while afterward, though, as the air pockets imploded and as she hit the ocean floor.
Yeah, you can still hear the ship tear itself apart underwater.
It's so spooky and terrifying how many people can hear that.
This one I gotta feel sorry for the Olympic. She just basically lost her sister. She still speeds. She's still speeding. She does not know at this moment the Titanic already went down.
She's presumably still screaming on the wireless, "Where the hell are you?"
Yeah, I think around this point, after the Titanic went down, there was basically... I found a transcript of all the wireless messages after Titanic went down. They have no idea. They had no clue that the ship is gone. So they were just basically transmitting blind.
And then
of
here's
course the Olympic.
Carpathia, this little unassuming liner that comes to save the day.
Yeah, and of course the Olympic, she received the news, and then just 4 years later, after losing Titanic, not only she also gained a new sister ship, the Britannic, but lost her at the same time.
And during the same war, Carpathia went down.
Yeah, definitely. In 1918, she went down, but it took her a little while longer to sink, more than the Titanic did, because
it took her a long time to go down.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was quite surprised by that.
I bet 2 torpedoes into the Carpathia, good enough. What are you trying to prove? Third one is just basically overkill.
Carpathia was never the same after this. She basically threw out her back, pulling out all the stops to come to the rescue.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I had a message on Discord saying that I'm glad that the Carpathia got a lot of attention this year. Too right. Too right.
I don't think the Carpathia can get enough love.
Oh, so she was an important part of the story as well.
Yeah. To be honest, so every Titanic week, or within the first couple of weeks, we give the Titanic so much attention. But we never give the rescue ship, the Carpathia, any attention. She was just kind of like in the backstage up until at this point. So like, you know what? Maybe it's time to do something a little bit different. Bring the Carpathia's story to life.
Definitely.
And we did.
And we did it, and I don't really regret it, really, not at all. Because her history with the videos that I've done, it was really interesting, very interesting to research, and I've gone deeper than I never would have done before, but I would really highly recommend listening to the full story from her second officer, James Bissett. My goodness, what a brilliant account it was, and I definitely highly recommend to read it, because I promise you it will be the best hour of your life reading this. And there we go, just like that, all the lifeboats will be coming towards the Carpathia, and the Carpathia would stop to pick up the lifeboats from 4 a.m. And apparently, once lifeboat number 2 was picked up, the first lifeboat, Captain Arthur Rostrum would visit Fourth Officer Joseph Boxall, and he would ask Boxall, "Where is the Titanic?" And in reply, Boxall said to Captain Rostrum, "She's gone." And the Carpathia would stay and wait for the other boats to come until about 8:30 a.m. with the last person to be on board being Second Officer Charles Lightoller.
I believe there was actually, I believe the conversation between Arthur Rostron and Joseph Boxhall was very much longer than what we normally see in the Titanic Honor and Glory animation. I believe our very own Thomas Andrews Jr. actually does have the conversation, but unfortunately he's not with us. Unfortunately, I wish he was, so that way he could be able to read off that transcript. But then again, all of us have lives, so...
Mm. And there were so many names for the Carpathia, because so many, she was given was Death Ship, which was like really cruel. And then another nickname the Carpathia was given was the Ship of Widows, because there were so many women that lost their husbands, and they stood waiting by the railings, waiting for them, and they just never came home.
And of course, here's the Californian. Hours later. So basically, they're transmitting back and forth to each other, asking, "Hey, what can we do to help?"
Nothing. Everything that can be done has been done.
Yeah. All California did was basically scan through the wreck site, look for any more, but unfortunately, there is no more.
And then the Carpathia travels back to New York, and the rest, they say, is history. That music still gets me, because survivors said that this song, "For Those in Peril on the Sea," or "Eternal Father Strong to Save," was sung in Sunday services the day before, April 14th, but no records define it now, because it's believed now that the actual song was "Oh God Help Our Ages Past," but that's another story for another time.
Yep. Basically, this version is made by the classical Matt. And I think I can find that version on YouTube. Yeah, a lot of these names that we see on the screen put a lot of work and effort into doing this real-time animation.
And that's all the photos taken by Francis Brown.
As you know, Titanic was actually not a very huge documented ship. Most of it just comes from amateur photographers. And most of the photos that we normally see actually came from the Olympic. So basically, all they did was basically rerun copies of the Olympics interiors and pass it off as Titanic.
Cheating, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of cheating though, but thankfully we did have amateur photographers on the Titanic, such as Father Francis Brown and of course the Odell family.
Of course,
Just
yeah.
on the ship itself. I don't know who did the outside photos as well.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was our reaction to Titanic Honor and Glory. Even though it was the 2023 version, is it still good as ever, or do you think that more could have been done or added?
Titanic Honor and Glory actually did a real good job.
I couldn't have asked for much more.
So I definitely agree with that, because a lot of people just say, "Oh, we're not too sure about that," but they've done the best that they could, really. And I definitely agree with you both. And they always do it more each year, even if they haven't done a real-time syncing animation in 2025. It's still as good as ever. And all the stories that we all share are really, really special to all of us. But what's been everyone's favorite part of talking about it during the recording? Like any stories or any things that we discussed about?
For me, it's always been as much as I love diving into the sciencey and engineering parts of it all, just the story of the Carpathia coming to the rescue has always resonated with me.
And then DK?
Me, it's basically discussing the stories of the 2,208 passengers and crew that were actually on board the ship, and of course telling the stories of the 712 that did survive, while the 1,496 did not survive.
I think my favorite part was just talking about the whole story, because it was very important to always keep the story alive. And ever since I've done my Titanic documentary many years ago, I became close to Titanic than ever before, because I kept in touch with descendants and I've gone into more research, and basically it's made me feel appreciated about Titanic more than ever, really.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I would like end the video for like a long discussion, but I'm afraid I'm starting to struggle a little bit to wake up. So I definitely think we'll probably leave the video here. But even though
For
Biscuit,
sure.
yeah, even though
Sure.
Biscuit
Just make it short.
couldn't take well, even though Biscuit couldn't come back really, it was great to have him on board anyway. And then it was great to have you, DK, and as well as you, Travis. I mean, oh,
Thank
my
you.
mind's
It was
going
great to be here. Thanks for having me.
no worries at all. And DK, thank you so much for recording and coming once again.
Welcome.
No worries. And big huge shout out to our pets as well: Smokey, Cubby, Paisley, and Sunny. We can't get.
He is somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
Well, he is somewhere, but so we definitely love our pet moments, as we always do during our Titanic
Yeah.
anniversaries. But hopefully next year we'll get a new real-time syncing animation to react to, or maybe even our own. We don't know, because I'm still on the hunt for an animator. But if you guys are interested in becoming an animator as well, please let us know, because we definitely want to have you on board if you are interested in doing a real-time syncing video for us, and then we can have more to react to, which will be quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we'll probably leave it at there. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and until then, we'll catch you very soon. Take care, guys. Have a wonderful night and wonderful day wherever you are. Take care. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
See you next time.
Bye.
Night, y'all.